Vielen hier im Raum mag sie bekannt sein. Dr. Ursula Schäfer-Preuß ist sozusagen, wenn Sie mir verzeihen, ein Urgestein in der EZ. Ich glaube, Sie stehen auch dazu. Zumindest haben Sie es mir gerade eben so verdeutlicht. Wenn wir vom persönlichen Lebenslauf ausgehen, dann kann ich nur sagen, da sind sehr viele Erfahrungsjahre im BMZ versammelt. Auch einige Jahre in der Asian Development Bank, wo sie sich hauptsächlich mit, also unter anderem auch mit Themen beschäftigt hat, die damals wahrscheinlich Vorreiterthemen gewesen sind. Also das heißt Gleichstellung der Geschlechter, etwas Ungehöriges und schon gar bei einer Bank. Und ich muss Ihnen einfach noch etwas mitteilen, was wir gerade im Gespräch so gehört haben. Das steht meistens in so einer Biografie nicht drin. Sie war die erste, die zum Rang eines Abteilungsleiters im BMZ bestellt worden ist. Und das sagte sie nach 40 Jahren, nachdem das Ministerium unterwegs war. Inzwischen gibt es, glaube ich, einen Gleichstellungsplan im Ministerium. Mal schauen, wie lange das dauert, bis wir da eine Gleichbehandlung der Geschlechter haben. Meine Damen und Herren, die Wirtschaftsexpertin per se gegenwärtig hat sie zwei Hüte, unter denen sie sicherlich gerne geht. Nämlich das eine ist, dass sie Vice President hier ist von UN Women, dem deutschen Komitee, aber vor allen Dingen auch mit dem Thema Wasser unterwegs und das Thema Wasser vertreten durch die Global Water Partnership in Stockholm. So, und jetzt werden wir das Ganze auf Englisch weiter fortführen. Also für diejenigen von Ihnen, die jetzt keine Lust haben, Englisch zu hören, noch schnell die Kopfhörer holen. Ursula Schäfer-Preuß, wir freuen uns auf Ihre Runde and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
I just want to briefly introduce Sharon Cabot-Jones with her presentation. She is the founder and CEO of FACE Africa, a US Liberia-based non-profit organization that funds and supports sustainable clean water, sanitation and hygiene projects in Liberia. Sharon was born in Liberia but left the country 89 at a young age of 8, shortly before the country's civil war began. The daughter of a career diplomat, she returned to Liberia almost 20 years after she left to find the country in desperate need and made it her mission to help, specifically focused on access to safe drinking water and sanitation. I want to say here, as my assignment at the Global Water Partnership in Stockholm, which looks into integrated management of water resources, the president of Liberia, Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, is our patron in the Global Water Partnership. So there is really a close linkage, and I think we all do hope that we can help to get the horrible situation you have in your country and the 3 other neighboring countries under control as soon as possible. But looking again into Sharon's activities in 2013, last year, she has been the World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, and she was listed by The Guardian UK as one of Africa's 25 top women achievers, alongside former President Joyce Banda of Malawi and Nobel laureate Lima Gobi. In 2012, she received the Longines Town and Country Women to Make a Difference Award for her work with FACE Africa. Sharon is also Huffington Post's Greatest Person of the Day and listed as one of Forbes magazine's 20 youngest power women of Africa. So it is really a lot you have already achieved. Move on like that. This is really women's power. And we are now all very much interested in your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I am super excited to be in Berlin. It's my first time in Germany. And I'm happy to give the introduction to this session on the ecological dimension of sustainability. I want to say a tremendous thank you to Andrea and the rest of her team for organizing this wonderful event. And it's truly, truly a pleasure to be here. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank the German government for their support to West Africa during this extremely difficult time for the region. This is personal for me because my family is from Guinea and Liberia, and it saddens me to see the devastation that the Ebola crisis is causing in Liberia especially. The situation is bleak, and it's likely to get worse before it gets better. There's some confusion around what the situation really is like on the ground. For most of you here, I'm sure you've seen news reports on CNN and BBC, and even on your German station about the Ebola crisis and the impact it's having in Africa. Sometimes we tend to be cynical about the media because they over-exaggerate and blow things out of proportion. But I wanted to paint a picture for you of what is truly happening on the ground, and particularly how it's affecting women and why this issue of women's access to resources is critical, not just from an ecological perspective, but from all levels. Picture Fatou, age 35. She's pregnant, and she goes into labor. This all happened sometimes in July when the outbreak first started to spread. But she couldn't get into JFK Hospital, which is the main general hospital in Monrovia, the capital city, because it's closed due to the Ebola crisis. Fatou finally finds a spot at a small private medical clinic, but by now she has started to develop complications from the pregnancy. Her family desperately tries to help, to find help in the entire city, but they have no luck. After 2 days, Fatou finally moves into yet another clinic not too far from where she lives. But at this point, it is too late. Fatou's baby has died, and it's not long after before Fatou herself dies. And this is just one of tens, if not hundreds of stories of what's happening in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea at the moment. According to the Liberian government, women and girls account for 55% of reported Ebola cases, 55% of Ebola cases in the affected countries, and up to 75% of those killed by Ebola have been women. This is largely due to the traditional roles that women play in the household. They're the primary caregivers and responsible for taking care of the sick. In certain communities, actually in most communities, women are responsible for washing and dressing the dead. This puts them in direct contact with an Ebola victim. These traditional gender roles and responsibilities have huge implications, not just with the current Ebola crisis, but with regards to access to resources in general. And it's important for us to realize how the attention to gender dynamics can improve women's lives for the better. Take, for example, the issue of water, an area that I'm extremely passionate about. Women bear the burden of water collection. And in Africa, women spend 60% of their day walking to fetch water. The continent loses 40 billion potential work hours annually. That's 40 billion hours a year walking to collect water, which reduces the amount of time available for education, for income-generating activities, for housework, and for childcare. Along their long walk, women are at a greater risk of harassment and sexual assault. They face adverse health effects from carrying up to 40 pounds of water on heads or backs. The detriment that water scarcity has on educational attainment for women in turn affects the social and economic capital of women in terms of leadership, in terms of earnings, and working opportunities. The lost numbers of potential school days and education hinders the next generation of African women and girls from breaking out of the cycle of unequal opportunity for gainful unemployment, which serves to perpetuate unequal opportunity for women in general. So addressing the issue of water, sanitation, and hygiene and access to these resources can provide direct and indirect benefits to the entire community, including health, education, and economic productivity. It's obvious, and we all know this. Women's access to resources are crucial and critical in reducing poverty, creating opportunity, and promoting peace. We can and should promote equality in access to resources. And to do this, we must not only solve social issues from the community level like we're doing at Face Africa, but we must attack systematic problems such as women's unequal access to adequate health care or the finances they may have to get treatment, such as what we're dealing with in Liberia and the region with relations to the Ebola crisis. This would mean challenging fundamental and dangerous disparities that can help break women out of the cycle of unequal opportunity and poverty. Because any meaningful effort to reduce poverty and improve the quality of lives of people around the world must and should include women-targeted programs. With this being said, I'm excited to welcome my co-panelists so that we can dive more deeply into the issue of women's access to resources as it relates to the environment and everything that has to do with sustainability. So I thank you for your time, and I look forward to a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Sarah, thanks a lot for this presentation and well, the situation you are confronted with in Liberia, but also there how to really improve the situation of women in a society under very difficult circumstances. Thanks a lot for that. I would now like to invite the two other panelists, Marie-Louise Absagen and Ute Kotschi, to come to the podium here. And I would like to start with Marie-Louise Absagen. Introduce her briefly. She is currently working with the German NGO, the Forum on Environment and Development, as a policy officer for the post-2015 agenda, so really dealing with what we are looking into here. She holds a Master of Arts in East Asian Studies and Political Science. The German NGO Forum was founded after the UN Conference on Environment and Development in 1992, so it's well, more than 20 years ago. And it coordinates the activities of the German NGOs in international policy processes on sustainable development. Marie-Louise, what is from your point of view really the main issue we should look into when we look into the ecological dimension of women's empowerment and getting women really more actively involved in all the relevant processes, also looking a little bit in the post-2015 agenda and how really to integrate women's dimensions in the various goals we have there. Please.
Yes, thank you. Also, thank you for this very interesting introduction, Sarah. I think we first have to look at a more systematic approach to the question of ecological sustainability in sustainable development. And I think two major keywords have already been mentioned, one of them being climate change, as Ambassador Espinosa has already mentioned, and the other one, Saren, gave, which is access to resources in general. I think what we have to keep in mind is that there is a huge competition going on worldwide for water and on land. One of them being, as I mentioned, climate change, which is dramatically reducing the resources we have, such as fertile soil and water, and it's even getting worse while we speak. This is especially dramatic for people living in developing countries or the global south. The other problem is that nowadays we have a phenomena going on which is called land grabbing or water grabbing. This means that either states or companies go to countries in the global south and buy or lease huge areas of land, either to secure food security for their own countries, such as Saudi Arabia, for instance, or to produce crops for the global agriculture market. This is especially relevant for European or American companies. Why am I saying this? This has a huge impact on people in the global south, especially women, but small-scale farmers in particular. Because either they are displaced from their land, so access to land is not even available anymore because they don't have their traditional lands, or they are exposed to these new kinds of agriculture models that this land grabbing normally follows, which is monocultures that heavily rely on pesticides, that heavily rely on fertilizers, and people working on these farms are exposed to that. So this is why when we talk about land, access to land and water in the global south, also these kind of monocultures need huge amounts of water to maintain their production. When we talk about this, we can talk about a so-called double discrimination of women, because they not only discriminated because they are women and have less access to land anyways, maybe because of patrilineal heritage systems that normally give land to the male in the family, but also because people in the global south are generally discriminated. And one important thing I would like to say in this context is that it is our behavior in the global north that leads to these dire conditions. Climate change is heavily linked to our energy production in Germany, in Europe, in the global north. And land grabbing is a result of our lifestyle here because of our consumption of food or biofuel, for instance. How does all this relate to the post-2015 agenda? We have various documents. We as a civil society has produced one as well, which says, for instance, in the agriculture sector for the global south and the global north, we should rely on small-scale farming instead of relying on these huge agribusinesses. And I think in the draft of the open working group that we are talking about here as well, we can see a lot of that as well. Gender is a very important issue in agriculture, in access to land and resources. So once we draft a resolution here, I think we should look again at what the Open Working Group has already said and what civil society actors are saying as well, and see what is already good and there and what we should better.
Thank you very much. You have made a reference to the document of the Open Working Group which had been finalized in July and has been declared by the UN Secretary General as the basis for the discussion on how to really define at the end of the day the sustainable development goals. So I think this is really a good way forward. We do know that certain groups of countries want to see specific issues more stressed in a different way, but at least we have this body there, and the impact of the civil society in the various countries is really very, very important to be seen. What I found interesting, having looked into the high-level report from the eminent persons, and Her Excellency Ambassador Espinosa has really given us excellent introduction into that, the relationship between gender and climate change is not in there. It is only mentioned specifically in the paper of the Open Working Group. Also, as Jeffrey Sachs in his document on the SDSN, with the SDSN group, has not specifically looked into that, but I think one really has to put this emphasis that we have this there, gender, women's empowerment and climate change and the implications. And I think, and I would like to invite Ute Kochi to elaborate a little bit on that. Before doing so, I would inform you that, Ute Kochi has served as Member of Parliament of Germany for Alliance 90 and the Greens, and spokeswoman for the development politics from 2005 until 2013. That means quite a long time. From 1995 to 2005, she served as a Member of Parliament of North Rhine-Westphalia and the spokeswoman of for European and One World politics, as well as spokeswoman for children, youth and family. So you really know the issues. Ute also worked as a consultant for development politics at the Welthaus in Bielefeld and as a member of the managing committee from 1992 to 1995. She holds a degree as cultural scientist from the University of Tübingen in empirical science of culture, ethnology, and geography, which I think is also an important feature for what we are discussing here. So, Ute, please.
Yeah, thanks, and many thanks to the invitation here. I think the podium is called No Future Without Resources, and I think that's the main issue. And women are linked to water and they are linked to land, and if there is no possibility for women to have access to water and land, there is no food available, and so we are at the core of everything of life. If there is no water, there is no food, there are no seeds, there is no availability. And because of the scarcity in the countries of the South, it has to become a real issue to put forward and to underline the need of these topics. We know that if you support women, and if you support women in the access to food and water, you will gain more food and you can reduce poverty. So I always say, why is it that women are not at the core of all of the whole issue of development politics? You need to put in the next future, regarding the post-2015 process, one really has to focus that the sustainable development goals, the G of the goals is maybe also the gender G. It means if we have the goals, you have to underline the importance of women, of gender mainstreaming. And therefore, I think it's a task for us also to say that if you want to change and if you want to reduce poverty, do it with the women. And because a lot of the things about the land responsibility, Marie-Louise had already said, I can only underline that in the whole process of land, we know that women have only 1% of the land access. They only own 1% of the land worldwide. And that's so little that it's a real scandal and nobody is really talking about this. Who is the owner of land? And because of the problem of land grabbing, because of the problem that rich countries send their richer companies to poorest countries, and they are reducing the possibility for women to gain access to land on the communal level, or even maybe some of them own their land. That means that we right now have a power shift against women, and it's going on. And we are dealing now with going to New York, and we will have the 2015 process. But right now, the world is shifting against women. So there must be an outcry along this process. that stop these grabbing from women. Yeah, you have to stop it right now. So it's not only going ahead alongside of this process, but it's only doing politics in the with the parliamentarians on these countries. And that's because I was a parliamentarian 18 years. I know that if you want to change the consciousness of the parliamentarians, you have to treat them, you have to lobby them, and you have to show up. And it's not done only with talking about the post-2015 process. That's a good issue right now. But you have to show the story, like Saran was doing. See in Liberia how women are living there. And if you want to change this, then support the women there. Yeah? And then that makes the link from a concrete issue to the parliamentarian discussions on the whole level in the world. And that's the reason why I can only say, or what I think it's very important too, that it's not the consciousnesses that we know women are at the core of the movement of more global justice, is to make people do something about it. We can talk as much as we want, but we have to show the act. And I'm stressing this. Today we are talking about act now. And it means for us that we are sitting here that we should show also in our communities that it's necessary to step aside of these women in these countries and to say, so protect these resources. And I'm very happy that we have already the data. We know about nearly everything. Yeah. Still, they are claiming we need more data regarding where's the gender issues. And I think what we have to do is to look that the gender mainstreaming is done through every point of the 17 goals that are right now on the table. Marie-Louise was saying, and I agree very much, we have a very nice draft. If this draft could be gone to all the approval of the states, that would be a very big step forward. So maybe we have to prevent the backing and a step backwards we have to expect, like usually. Is there an outcome of a big event, a big conference right in the last years who haven't been a backlash? So maybe it must be done that we say through ecological, through social rights, through economical rights of women, help to fight against the backlash which we maybe expect in the next years. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Ute. This was a very clear statement with all the multi-dimensional facets. And this, in a way, is the challenge I think we do have. And I find it particularly interesting and important that you have mentioned and have made a plea to get the parliamentarians, men and women, more involved in these issues. And I think this is also something where we as UN Women Germany have to do more and have to try to do more to open up the dialogue, to find and achieve a better understanding for the issues. I would like to come back to Saran and ask her what she thinks, being the founder and CEO of Face Africa, could be done through this channel to really increase the awareness of the dramatic situation, looking into gender-related elements in the ecological, in the economic and the social dimension, but focusing on the ecological dimension, please.
Great, thank you. I think injustice for women anywhere is injustice for women everywhere. And going back to the issue of water and land scarcity, the next war will not be fought over oil, it will be fought over water. So we do have a water crisis on our hands, and it's something we need to pay attention to seriously. Because let's not forget which social groups are impacted the most, or are impacted negatively by wars and displacement. Women, more than any other social groups. So as we talk about water and land and resource scarcity, we must think about the long-term effects that it has on women and girls. And for me, I think one way is to push for more women to take up political leadership positions so that they have a seat at the table when important policy decisions are being made about issues that affect them the most. And as we know, and some countries may be a little bit different, but generally women are underrepresented when it comes to political positions. And I think the more women we have in higher positions of leadership, the more of a voice that we have, because at the end of the day, these issues all come down to policies, and policies are made in government, and we need more women in those positions.
Thank you very much. Marie-Louise, asking you more or less the same question as well, the German NGO Forum and your specific issue is so important. Where do you think from your organization you could really have the most effective way of changing things and not or preventing that there is a downscaling of gender-related issues in the overall global agenda?
I think there are three aspects here. First of all, I would strongly support what Ute said about land grabbing from women. And I think we have to realize that we are part of that system, each and every one of us, unless we are actually trying to change our behavior, our lifestyle. For instance, meat consumption, which is a pretty big topic for the Green Party that Ute used to be part of, but I can very strongly relate to that. To produce 1 kilogram of meat, we need 3 kilograms of soy. And for 1 kilogram of beef, we need 15,000 liters of water. So what does that mean for our lifestyle? If we import soy from Brazil, what does that mean for deforestation, for people losing their land, for small-scale farmers losing their employment? And for women especially, since they make up such a huge workforce, especially in the agriculture sector. The other issue is the responsibility of governments. And since we are in Germany and we as an NGO network are especially focusing on lobbying the governments in Europe, it's nice that people from the ministry are saying they support the idea of sustainability and they are trying to include that in their politics. But actually what we see, especially in the agriculture sector in Europe, that is exactly the opposite. That it's not small-scale farmers or women in that case being supported in the global north, but that we have massive dumping of our agriculture products in the global south, which ruins structures there. So unless we change that, and unless each and every one of us, maybe in this process of commenting this Zukunftscharta, maybe in the process of lobbying the government on different levels, we should actually really focus on our European politics being changed. And the other one I wanted to say about including women in decision-making processes, I think we have a really long way to go in everywhere in the world. I mean, if we look at the German ministry, for instance, the decisions in the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the leading people are men. Of course, the ministry is made out of a huge percentage of women because it's a topic we are all interested in, but the decision makers in the end are men. And the same in environmental and development NGOs. I mean, I'm not even excluding us. I think we still have a long way to go. And similar in the Global South, or probably even worse, that women, especially in questions that concern the environment, are not included, even though we know that women have a special understanding, for instance, of biodiversity. Simply because they make up such an important factor in the agriculture, they just know so much more about biological diversity of seeds, which is a whole other issue, how Europe is trying to control the seed market, or about herbs, about growing plants in general. They are the ones that buy food for the family mostly, so they make the decisions what kind of products the family wants to consume. So unless we include them with their special knowledge, especially of traditional agriculture products, of biodiversity and decision-making processes, gender equality in the environmental scene can never be achieved.
Thank you, Marie-Louise. I got a warning from the colleagues here that time is running out, so I would now like to invite the audience to ask a couple of questions. Please present, say your name and the organization you are representing here, and keep questions or comments short. So the issue is really, what do you think are the main messages we have gotten here? Is more or less everything reflected in the statements, the presentations? Is something missing, so that at the end we really can come to a good conclusion of this section looking into the ecological dimension of gender equality? Who wants to start? Yes, please, over there.
Thank you very much. I'm Katrin Erlingsen, working for DSW, German NGO based here in Berlin. I would have a question to you, Søren. In many developing countries, especially those who maybe have natural resources such as oil, we hear that their protection of the environment will come after social and economic development of their societies. How do you think it can be achieved to engage political leaderships in these countries in protecting the environment while having social development as well?
Thank you for that. I think developing countries, especially countries in Africa, who are not great contributors to climate change, are in a really great position to, I think, lead the way when it comes to the debate on climate change and protecting the environment. Again, this is where, because a lot of these things, a lot of these decisions are made at the political level, a lot of these policy issues. And this is where I think it's important to have enough women representation so that they can advocate on behalf of their communities, on behalf of their families, on behalf of their societies, as far as what changes they want to see. In Liberia, for example, it's a telling example of land grabbing. 75% of the entire country is under foreign control. Now, mind you, we have a woman political leader, whether she's entirely effective and competent and pushing for all of these issues and rights that affect women is a different story. But I think from the legislative perspective, the more women leadership we have, and I can't stress that enough, we're extremely underrepresented in African societies. Except for Rwanda, women just do not have a voice. They don't have a say when it comes to policies and issues that affect them. So we need to put more systems in place that can nurture and develop more women leaders so that they can become great advocates for some of these issues.
Thank you very much. You want? Okay, first, yeah, you and then you will comment, Ute? Okay.
Mein Name ist Ulrike Klingelhöfer vom Center for Profs, einem unabhängigen Wissenschafts- und Forschungsinstitut, das die Ursachen für die Ungleichheit zwischen Frauen und Männern erforscht und Maßnahmen zu deren Überwindung entwickelt. Ich möchte mich beziehen auf die Aspekte, die Frau Kaba-Jones und auch Frau Koschny genannt hat, was wichtig ist, die Situation der Frauen zu sehen, dass diejenigen, die die Arbeit leisten, das ist hier wunderbar anschaulich deutlich geworden, sind Frauen. Die in erster Linie davon betroffen sind, sind Frauen. Und der Punkt ist nur, das eine ist, Frauen unterstützen und das andere ist auch Parlamentarier beispielsweise gewinnen, wie Sie gesagt haben, und ja, anzugehen, damit sie sich einsetzen und etwas tun. Das andere ist aber auch ein Bewusstsein bei der anderen Hälfte der Menschheit zu erreichen. Und hier ist unbedingt nötig, Maßnahmen durchzuführen, zu arbeiten mit Männern, die Partner sind, die in den Leitungspositionen sind, die zu bestimmen haben in der Community und mit diesen Männern dahingehend zu arbeiten, dass sie zunächst erst einmal lernen, wertzuschätzen, diese Frauenarbeit. Also to value this work, this immense work, das zu sehen. Und das geht nicht von selbst. Damit das erreicht werden kann, benötigt es Maßnahmen, benötigt es gezielte Arbeit mit Männern. Wir haben die Erfahrung in dem Fulda-Mosocho-Projekt, da ist im Bereich FGM mit Männern konsequent an einer Haltungsänderung, Bewusstseinsänderung gearbeitet worden und das hat zur Folge, dass eine ganze Bewegung in der ganzen Community zustande kommt, dass Veränderungen, diese Transformation, die wir suchen, in einer ganz anderen Schnelligkeit und Intensität vorankommt. Und deshalb hier noch hinzu zu dem, was gesagt wurde, Arbeit mit Männern zum Erreichen dieser Ziele ist erforderlich.
Thank you very much. Somebody else from the audience here, otherwise I would like to invite Ute probably to make a statement. Ute.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. There is, of course, it's necessary to work with the men too, but I say also empower women so that they can stand up against men and say we have also rights. I think that to support men to understand women, that's a really long task, and most of the women do it their lifelong. Yeah. But of course, you need to have structures. Yeah. Your example shows that it's done from the outside. But I think it's also necessary to support the women in the country themselves, that they can make the change possible. And therefore, I prefer to go to the women to show that they have a voice, that they have a right, and they have support. And maybe that's also the thing we should introduce into this, in the debate, that we need the global partnership, which is also one of the goals of the last MDGs and will become maybe one of the next SDGs. But the global partnership must mean that we support women groups directly. And I think there is still no real tool, no real access, no real idea how to manage this. One of the necessities of this is give money to these women. We need money, the money flow. It goes, the tremendous amount goes to men, through male hands, and they make male decisions. So we have to cut it. We have to support the women with money. And we have to give women the credits so that they can buy their land, or that they can that the community can buy land, so that they can make up water resources, that they can give workers so that they work for them, and we have to channel the money which comes from the international communities to the women. And I mean that is a tremendous task to, alongside the discussion to the post-2015 process, where does the next money goes? The money flow. We have to channel the money through gender goals. And if that not happen, we will not reach the women, and that will not change anything.
Thank you. Ute, please, at the very end, and then I see another hand here, please. She needs a mic there.
Good morning, my name is
Katrin. I was pointing at somebody else, but
okay.
Okay. First you and then you, okay. And then you here.
Thank you, Marion Böker vom International Alliance of Women, Deutscher Frauenring. Ich wollte zu diesem Geld sagen, es geht ja darum, dass jedes Geld, jede Ressource für Gender auch einen positiven Aspekt haben muss. Also Gender Equality muss immer das Outcome oder der Impact sein, und das müssen wir auch messen. Das muss hier auch in diesen SDGs erkennbar sein. Das hat ja auch die Botschafterin vorhin, Ihre Exzellenz, erklärt, dass wir einen überprüfbaren Rahmenprozess brauchen. Das heißt, wir brauchen hinterher auch einen Prozess, ist das Geld auch wirksam für Gender Equality eingesetzt worden, für den Access von Frauen zu den verschiedenen Ressourcen und so weiter. Also das, was als Gender Budgeting auch erwähnt wurde, das fehlt hier auch so ein bisschen. Und ich möchte noch einen Punkt machen, der mir so als Chapeau auch fehlt. Da wird leider kein Bezug genommen zu dem Recht auf Frieden. Und ich denke, zurzeit müssen wir doch sehr besorgt sein, ob wir nicht in ganz anderen Kriegen, nicht nur Öl oder andere Ressourcen, sondern auch aus ideologischen Gründen wieder, um es mal zu umschreiben, in Kriege kommen. Und hier müssen wir auch die Frauen und ihre Errungenschaften verteidigen. Deshalb würde ich da auch noch mal darauf hinweisen, dass bei dem Chapeau die Bezugnahme auf das Recht auf Frieden fehlt, was ja auch beim Menschenrechtsrat jetzt weiter ausformuliert für eine neue Erklärung wird. Und es fehlt auch das Abkommen gegen Folter und noch irgendeins. Also da sind leider nur 7 Menschenrechtsabkommen erwähnt.
Okay, thank you very much. Then, well, you please first, and then the other colleague down there. Don't worry.
Good morning, my name is Katharina Hock. I work for the WWF. I was really happy that you mentioned the problem that is a land access, because for environmental organization it's also really really big issue, because it has a lot of impact on biodiversity. One question I have to you as a panel: what we see now in Africa is that many big corporations are coming to different countries, not just from China, but also from Brazil, and they promise the governments a lot of things. They promise jobs, they promise education for the kids, but what we see in many of these countries is that not many of these promises are actually fulfilled. But these governments, they have such a big impact on these countries and these corporations, and sometimes I wonder, what can we do as a civil society, as NGOs, to really, to really help this government to see that not all these promises can be fulfilled, and I think that's a big problem.
Thanks a lot for that. Well, I would just briefly mention, in that context, it is so important that the civil society in the countries on the ground gets a voice. This is the issue. And then we get the other part, women leadership and women's empowerment. Water sector is the classical example for that. Without really mobilizing the civil society in the countries, the governments will have a problem, because they only hear a few voices, but not the full spectrum. A long way to go, but that means all the NGOs across the world have to really take over the responsibility, or more actively, and work on the ground. I have another voice there, and I think then we have to come to a conclusion here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Monika Hirsch-Preetz. I come from the bullying consulting of Berlin-Brandenburg. I try to say it in English. I support everything you said before on the podium, but these ways take a long time. And I guess we need short ways. One way could be, like you said, Frau Absagen, to have finance support, maybe about a model from UNOS microfinance for women in this connection with water and with the earth. So maybe about BMZ, it is possible to have a work group to this microfinance system. And I was at I say it in German. I was on the Vision Summit. Es war eine Veranstaltung, wo es um die VQ-Quality geht. Das heißt, wir sind jetzt auf dem Weg weg von dieser Vereinzelung hin zu einem Wir. Das heißt, das, was heute angesprochen wurde, das, was im Süden passiert, betrifft den Norden, das, was im Osten passiert, betrifft den Westen. Und wir müssen einfach dieses Gedankengut, dass wir alle betroffen sind von dem, was weltweit passiert, die diversen Krisen, dass das uns alle angeht. Und ich denke, auch hier müsste überlegt werden, wie kann man diesen Gedanken verstärken und ausbauen.
Thank you very much. I saw Angela Langkamp, but then I think I have to close the speakers list.
My name is Angela Langkamp from Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. I felt triggered by the last comment, and I remembered a conference on women's participation or women's role in society and in economic life from the BMZ in 2008. And there was an African businessman, a very wealthy, a very powerful one, and he said, why do we always say micro when we talk women and macro when we talk men? So I think we need to go beyond small and micro. I mean, we had the question before about finances. It's time to really invest in it. That's the one thing. There's another point. When I look at the theme of this panel, and it talks of access to, but not control over, I think we are stepping too short. We need to go the next step. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think we have gotten quite a few strong messages, which should then be included into the final statement. We really have to define this a little further. But what I would see here as a takeaway, this we, us, all dimension is important, also involving the men. Gender equality is men and women. So this has to be stressed, and we know from Germany, for example, education, primary education and so on, girls are now more privileged, better in learning and getting things done. So special programs have to be introduced for the boys. That means I'm fully aware of this issue, and in a way we should reflect this appropriately in our takeaways. What is nevertheless very important to get the women leadership being pushed more actively, and while Sharon is the best representative, so to speak, to do this from the young generation, it's not only us who have gone quite some stony paths to get where we are, but have the young generation giving good examples for women leadership. And then also get the parliamentarians involved. Not only women, but first and foremost female parliamentarians, but also men looking into gender-related issues. And then the vast area of, land grabbing, the water resource problem. Water is the risk number 2 among the 5 main risks we are all confronted with. So we have a lot to do there, and from there really see how we can move on with the agenda, also measure results. I think a lot is already on the table, so to speak, or available in international fora. How to measure, indicators have been discussed, put down. Even when you look into the statement of the Open Working Group, there are lots of goals and sub-goals and indicators already defined, but they have to be implemented. That means we need an implementation organ, and my personal conviction would be the best would be to empower United Nations bodies, a body in the United Nations to do that. But this means the global society has to come to an unanimous decision on that. I think I leave this here unless my panel members want to get some other messages into the scene. So, shall we leave it here? But there's one hand at the end still. Lifted, please.
Sorry, I know time is a resource as well. I wanted to recommend that if we talk about we have to sharpen the language, because one of the big challenge is or was that the human rights framework is covering the whole draft or outcome. And it was remembered many times, and I saw it now in the drafts and in the recommendations by the Women's Major Group, the Young Women's Panel, etc. But the we will melt it all together. Human rights is individual right. So we have learned in the United Nations to define language and to stick to this defined language. And this means that we better then make a long sentence and mention all the groups, the young women, the elderly women, or women of all ages, and add and make a listing. But if we melt it all together as a we, it is very confusing, and nobody can then tell or complain about their own individual rights. So we can also, we here, as people, participants, we can describe that which countries, which states, which stakeholders we mean. I think we should be a bit more specified on this in the language and stick to the human rights language, individual rights.
Thank you very much for this intervention. I wanted to stress men and women, and that was the issue that looking into we, but men and women is important. All the other things, we know how many elements we have to look into. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks to my colleagues here, friends on the panel, and Sharon, to you, and well, to your friends, people in the country of Liberia. Well, we want to help you wherever we can, so let's join hands for getting the problems settled in a way. Thanks to all of you, thanks a lot, and I think now we have a little break.